Hey everyone! Welcome back to Sleep with Dragon Ball Lore. Before we drift into tonight's journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy the stories we explore together here on this channel. And let me know down in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, settling in for the night, or perhaps just taking a quiet moment in their day. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's ease into one of the most profound character journeys in all of Dragon Ball. A story of darkness and light, of hatred and love, of a being who began as the embodiment of evil itself and transformed into one of Earth's greatest protectors and most devoted guardians. Tonight, we explore the tragic saga of Piccolo, a character whose very existence is defined by division, conflict, and the agonizing journey toward wholeness. This is not simply a story about a villain becoming a hero. It's far more complex, far more painful, and far more beautiful than that. This is a story about identity itself, about what it means to inherit evil, to carry the weight of sins you didn't commit, to be born for vengeance yet discover love, to lose yourself piece by piece only to find that in losing yourself, you become more complete than you ever imagined possible. Piccolo's journey spans the entirety of Dragon Ball's narrative, from the final saga of the original series through Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, and into the recent Dragon Ball Super, superhero film, where he achieves a godly transformation that places him alongside the mightiest warriors in the multiverse. But power is not what makes Piccolo's story tragic or triumphant. It is the slow, painful shedding of hatred, the gradual opening of a heart that was created to be closed, the transformation of a being literally born to kill into someone who would die to protect, who would sacrifice everything for a child that wasn't his own, who would become not just a warrior, but a teacher, a friend, a guardian, and yes, even something like a father. To understand Piccolo, we must first understand that he is not one being, but many. He is the son of a demon king, yet also the reincarnation of that king. He is the expelled evil of a pure-hearted Namekian, yet he is also that Namekian made whole again. He carries within him the voices and essences of Nail and Kami, warriors and gods absorbed into his being. He is both Piccolo and not Piccolo, a being who has died and been reborn, who has merged and separated, who has lost his name and found himself. And through it all, through centuries of existence, split across multiple beings and identities, there runs a single thread: the capacity for change, the possibility of redemption, the truth that what we are born as does not define what we become. The tragedy of Piccolo is that he had to lose everything to gain anything. He had to die to learn how to live. He had to sacrifice his body to save a child and discover in that final moment what it meant to care for someone more than yourself. He had to absorb the good half of his original self to become whole. Yet in doing so, he ceased to be entirely himself. He had to reject his father's legacy, shed his demonic identity, and accept that the person he was born to be, a destroyer, an avenger, a king of demons, was not who he was meant to become. And perhaps most tragically of all, he had to watch as the universe grew ever more dangerous, as threats beyond imagination emerged, and accept that despite his incredible strength, despite his wisdom and tactical brilliance, he would often be surpassed, relegated to supporting roles, watching from the sidelines as others saved the day. Yet even in this, Piccolo found purpose, not as the strongest, but as the wisest, not as the hero, but as the one who makes heroes possible. This is his story, from the ancient Nameless Namekian who arrived on Earth centuries ago, through the demonic King Piccolo who terrorized the world, through Piccolo Jr., who entered the World Martial Arts Tournament with murder in his heart, through the reluctant ally who trained a crying child in the wilderness, through the warrior who faced gods and monsters, through the mentor who guided the next generation, and finally through the Orange Piccolo, who stands as a symbol that change is always possible, that redemption is never beyond reach, that even those born in darkness can find their way to the light. So settle in, close your eyes if you wish, and let's journey through the tragic, beautiful, painful, and ultimately triumphant saga of Piccolo, from villain to hero, from demon to guardian, from hatred to love. Long before Goku ever landed on Earth, long before the Dragon Balls granted their first wish, long before the Z fighters assembled to defend the planet, there came to Earth another alien child, alone in a spacecraft, fleeing a dying world. This was the Nameless Namekian, the son of Katas, a brilliant and loving Namekian from the planet Namek, and his arrival would shape the destiny of Earth in ways no one could have imagined. The parallels to Goku's later arrival are striking, almost poetic in their similarity. Both sent as infants in spacecraft, both the last survivors of catastrophes that destroyed their worlds, both destined to become protectors of their adopted home. Yet the series itself never draws attention to these parallels, leaving this connection as an unspoken echo across the Dragon Ball narrative. The story of the Nameless Namekian begins not on Earth but on Namek, a world of green skies and emerald waters, a peaceful planet inhabited by a race of slug-like humanoids with incredible abilities. The Namekians were a gentle people, wise and long-lived, with the remarkable capability to create magical artifacts of immense power. The dragon, balls themselves, orbs that could grant nearly any wish to those who gathered all seven. But peace, as it so often does in the Dragon Ball universe, gave way to crisis. Planet Namek faced a sudden and catastrophic climate disaster, a cataclysm that threatened to drive the entire Namekian race to extinction. The skies darkened, the waters turned cold, and one by one, the Namekians began to perish as their world turned hostile to the very life it had nurtured for eons. In these desperate final days, Katas, one of Namek's most brilliant minds, made an impossible decision. He could not save his people, could not stop the climate catastrophe that was consuming their world, but he could save his son. He could give one Namekian a chance at survival, a future beyond the dying planet. And so Katas placed his infant son into a spacecraft, a small vessel containing all his hopes, and launched it into the vast emptiness of space, sending his child alone into the unknown with no way of knowing if he would survive, where he would land, or what kind of life awaited him among the stars. The child had no name that we know of, no identity beyond being Katas's son. And as his spacecraft hurtled through the cosmos, his entire race perished behind him, leaving only one other survivor, the ancient guru, eldest of the Namekians, who would endure alone on the dying planet for centuries until new Namekians could be born from his eggs. The spacecraft traveled for an unknown length of time, crossing impossible distances, until finally it descended through the atmosphere of a small blue planet in a distant corner of the universe, Earth. The Nameless Namekian emerged from his vessel alone, an alien child on a strange world, with no knowledge of what had become of his home. No memory of his father's sacrifice, no understanding of his true heritage. He was, for all intents and purposes, the last of his kind, as far as anyone on Earth knew, singular and unique, a being unlike anything the planet had ever seen. And as he grew, as he learned about this new world and the humans who inhabited it, the Nameless Namekian discovered that he possessed extraordinary abilities, far beyond what the humans around him could comprehend. He had incredible strength, the power to manipulate energy, the ability to regenerate lost limbs, and most remarkably, the capacity to create Dragon Balls, magical artifacts of a type Earth had never known. As the years passed and the Nameless Namekian matured, he learned of Earth's guardian, a position of great honor and responsibility. The guardian of Earth was tasked with watching over the planet, guiding its development and protecting it from threats both external and internal. It was a role that required great power, yes, but more importantly, it required absolute purity of heart, an uncorrupted soul devoted entirely to the protection of life. The Nameless Namekian, recognizing both his power and his desire to help this world that had become his home, approached the current guardian and requested to be trained, to eventually take on the mantle of Earth's protector. It seemed a natural fit, a powerful being with noble intentions, seeking to dedicate his life to the planet's welfare. But the guardian refused. The old guardian looked into the Nameless Namekian's heart and saw something troubling, a darkness lurking within, an evil presence that tainted the otherwise noble soul. It wasn't that the Nameless Namekian was evil, not consciously, not in his intentions or his actions, but within him. As within all complex beings, there existed a capacity for darkness, a shadow self, negative emotions and destructive impulses that formed part of his complete nature. For humans, this duality is accepted as natural. The eternal struggle between better angels and baser instincts playing out in every person. But for the guardian of Earth, such internal conflict was unacceptable. The position demanded absolute purity, a heart completely unclouded by darkness. And so long as evil existed within the Nameless Namekian, he could never assume the role, no matter how powerful he became, no matter how genuine his desire to protect. This rejection could have ended the story. The Nameless Namekian could have accepted this limitation, found another path, lived out his long life on Earth in some other capacity. But the desire to become guardian burned within him, the need to fulfill what he saw as his purpose, to use his incredible abilities in service of this planet that had become his home. And so, Faced with an impossible requirement, the Nameless Namekian did something remarkable and terrible. He found a way to split himself, to literally divide his being into two separate entities, expelling the darkness within him so that what remained would be pure enough to pass the Guardian's test. The technique was agonizing and unprecedented. The Nameless Namekian concentrated all of his evil, all of his darkness, every negative emotion and destructive impulse, and tore it from his soul, giving it form and substance, making it manifest as a separate being entirely. Imagine the pain of such a division, of reaching inside yourself and ripping out a fundamental part of your nature, of watching as that part of you becomes something else, someone else, a being that is you and yet not you, that carries your memories and your power, but twisted, corrupted, freed from the restraints that your better nature imposed. The Nameless Namekian split himself, and from that splitting came two beings: Kami, the pure good half who retained the desire to protect and guide, and King Piccolo, the concentrated evil given form and fury, cast down from the heights to the world below. Kami, the remaining good half, achieved his goal. Purified through the violent excision of his shadow self, he was now acceptable to become guardian of Earth. He ascended to the lookout, that floating palace above the clouds, and took on the mantle of protector, creating the Dragon Balls to help the people of Earth, watching over the planet through long centuries, attempting to guide humanity toward peace and prosperity. But the cost of his purity was catastrophic. In expelling his evil, Kami had not destroyed it, but rather set it loose upon the world. And that evil concentrated and given independent existence would become one of the greatest threats Earth had ever faced. King Piccolo, the cast of darkness, emerged into the world with all the power of the Nameless Namekian, but none of the restraint, none of the compassion, none of the desire to protect. He was ambition without conscience, power without mercy, intelligence turned entirely toward domination and destruction. And unlike Kami, who saw himself as a guardian and guide, King Piccolo embraced the role of demon, of destroyer, of king of darkness, who would bend the world to his will, or burn it to ashes drying. He wore the insignia demon on his chest as a badge of pride, accepting and celebrating the evil that Kami had rejected. For centuries, this division persisted, two halves of one being existing separately, Kami on his lookout, attempting to guide Earth toward light, and King Piccolo lurking in the shadows, building his power, spawning his demonic children, waiting for his moment to seize control of the world. They were linked, these two, bound together by their shared origin. If one died, so too would the other, a connection that would prove critical in the struggles to come. Neither was complete, neither was whole. Each was a fragment of what the Nameless Namekian had been. And in their division lay the seeds of tragedy that would span generations and define the fate of Earth itself. This was the origin, the first tragedy, the moment when one being became two, when good and evil were separated in a way nature never intended, when purity was purchased at the price of creating a monster. And from this division, from this ancient splitting, would eventually come Piccolo, heir to this complicated legacy, born from evil, yet destined to discover something his progenitor never knew. That darkness and light need not be enemies, that wholeness is found not in purity but in acceptance, that redemption is possible even for those created to be irredeemable. For a time, King Piccolo remained in shadow, building his strength, spawning his children, creating an army of demons to serve his will. These children, creatures like tambourine, cymbal, and drum, were extensions of their father's power, each carrying a fragment of his strength and his malevolence, each entirely devoted to the Demon King's vision of a world ruled by fear and suffering. The world above remained largely ignorant of this growing threat, going about their lives unaware that a being of immense power and absolute evil was preparing to emerge from the darkness and claim dominion over the planet. But King Piccolo's ambitions would eventually collide with resistance. The martial artists of Earth, warriors who had trained their bodies and spirits to peak human capability and beyond, stood as an obstacle to demonic domination. These fighters, masters of their crafts, had the strength and skill to challenge even supernatural threats. And as King Piccolo's machinations eventually brought him into conflict with the martial arts community, a war began that would devastate both sides. The details of this first conflict are shrouded in Dragon Ball's ancient past. But the outcome is clear. King Piccolo was defeated and sealed away using the evil containment wave, a technique that trapped him within a rice cooker, imprisoning the Demon King for centuries. It was not death, not truly, but rather a living tomb, a prison from which escape seemed impossible. And in that sealed darkness, King Piccolo waited, his hatred undimmed, his ambitions unchanged, simply biding his time until circumstances should free him once more. That freedom would eventually come during the original Dragon Ball series, when King Piccolo was released from his imprisonment and immediately set about enacting his revenge upon the world. This time he would not fail. This time he would ensure that no force could stand against him. King Piccolo emerged with a fury born of centuries of confinement, and his reign of terror began in earnest, calculated, brutal, and absolutely ruthless. One of King Piccolo's first and most devastating acts was the systematic murder of martial artists across the world. He understood that these warriors represented the greatest threat to his domination. Humans who had pushed beyond normal limitations, who possessed the strength and technique to potentially challenge even his power. And so he sent his spawn, particularly the cruel tambourine, to hunt down and eliminate every martial artist they could find, targeting them systematically, killing masters and students alike, eliminating the very possibility of organized resistance before it could form. Master Roshi's friend Krillin became one of Tambourine's victims, killed after a martial arts tournament simply for being a trained fighter. His death a stark reminder that King Piccolo's threat was personal, immediate and deadly. This wasn't warfare on a grand scale, not yet, but rather assassination. The targeted elimination of anyone who might have the power to oppose the Demon King's will. And for those who survived, the message was clear. King Piccolo had returned and the age of demons had begun. But King Piccolo's ambitions extended far beyond simply ruling through fear and murder. he sought to fundamentally remake the world according to his dark vision, creating a society where the strong devoured the weak, where mercy was forbidden, where the only law was his will and the only virtue was the capacity for destruction. He declared May 9th as Piccolo Day, a holiday celebrating his rule, mandatory for all humans to observe or face execution. He instituted a reign where human life had no value except as entertainment for the Demon King and his spawn, where people lived in constant terror of arbitrary violence from their demonic overlords. And to ensure that his reign could never be challenged through supernatural means, King Piccolo sought out and destroyed Shenron, the eternal dragon. The Dragon Balls, created by Kami, represented a potential threat to King Piccolo's dominance, the possibility that someone might wish for his defeat or destruction. And so the Demon King gathered the Dragon Balls, summoned Shenron, made his wish for restored youth to ensure his power would not fade with age, and then destroyed the dragon, seemingly forever eliminating the possibility of wishes being granted against him. It was a calculated move, removing a potential weapon his enemies might use, ensuring that his strength could not be undone by magic. But King Piccolo had not accounted for Goku. The young Saiyan warrior, still unaware of his alien heritage, had been training under Master Roshi and had developed into a fighter of extraordinary capability. Someone who combined natural Saiyan combat instincts with disciplined martial arts training and an unbreakable spirit. When Krillin fell to Tambourine's attack, when Goku witnessed firsthand the cruelty of King Piccolo's regime, the young warrior became the unlikely champion who would stand against the Demon King's reign of terror. The battle between Goku and King Piccolo became legendary, a clash between the purest heroism and the darkest evil, between a young warrior fighting to protect his friends and a Demon King determined to rule through fear and domination. Goku pursued King Piccolo across the world, confronting Tambourine and destroying the demon spawn in revenge for Krillin's death. He faced Symbol and obliterated him as well. Each victory chipped away at King Piccolo's forces. Each confrontation brought Goku closer to the Demon King himself, and each step forward demonstrated that even the mightiest evil could be challenged by someone with sufficient courage and strength. The final confrontation took place at King Piccolo's fortress, where the Demon King had established his seat of power, the symbolic center of his dark kingdom. Master Roshi and others had attempted to use the evil containment wave to seal King Piccolo once more. But the technique failed, costing Roshi his life and leaving Goku as the last hope for Earth's salvation. The young Saiyan faced the rejuvenated Demon King in single combat, and the battle was brutal beyond measure. King Piccolo's power, restored to its peak through his wish for youth, was overwhelming. He battered Goku mercilessly, breaking bones, inflicting injuries that would have killed lesser warriors, demonstrating the vast gulf in power between a trained human martial artist and a being of supernatural evil. But Goku refused to surrender, refused to accept defeat, refused to allow King Piccolo's vision of a world drowned in darkness to become reality. Drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he possessed, channeling the spirit of everyone who had fallen to the Demon King's cruelty, Goku launched himself forward in a final desperate attack. He propelled his entire body like a missile, fist extended, penetrating King Piccolo's chest in a strike that pierced clean through the demon's torso. It was a killing blow, mortal and absolute, the kind of injury from which even a being as powerful as King Piccolo could not recover. As King Piccolo lay dying, his blood pooling beneath him, his reign of terror ending after mere days of absolute rule, the Demon King did something that would echo through the generations and set in motion the next chapter of this tragic saga. With his final breath, with the last reserves of his demonic power, King Piccolo spat out an egg. This was not simply another spawn like tambourine or cymbal, not merely another demonic offspring to serve his will. This was something far more significant. This egg contained King Piccolo's reincarnation, his second chance, his heir and successor who would carry on his legacy of hatred and vengeance. The egg flew off into the distance, landing in remote wilderness where it would gestate undisturbed. And from it would eventually emerge the being who would be known as Piccolo. Piccolo Jr., the son and reincarnation of the Demon King, born for one purpose alone: to kill Son Goku and avenge his father's death. King Piccolo's final words before death were a curse upon Goku and a promise of vengeance. He assured the young Saiyan that his death would not be the end, that his legacy would continue, that from his final act would come a being even more powerful than himself, one who would hunt Goku to the ends of the earth and make him pay for everything he had done. And then King Piccolo died, his body finally succumbing to the catastrophic wound Goku had inflicted, his reign ending almost as quickly as it had begun, leaving behind only scattered memories of terror and the egg that contained his rebirth. With King Piccolo's death, his influence seemed to fade from the world. The demons he had spawned vanished, his dark vision of society collapsed, and Earth began to recover from the brief but brutal reign of terror. Shenron was restored through Kami's power. The Dragon Balls became active once more, and life gradually returned to normal. But the egg remained, hidden and growing, and within it a new Piccolo was forming, inheriting not only his father's power, but also his memories, his hatred, his singular focus on destroying the one who had ended the Demon King's ambitions. This new Piccolo would not simply be King Piccolo's son or successor. He would be King Piccolo reborn, carrying the same consciousness, the same essence, the same fundamental being, but in a new form, younger, potentially stronger, and absolutely devoted to fulfilling his father's dying wish for revenge. The Demon King's reign had been brief, measured in days rather than years, but its impact was profound. King Piccolo had demonstrated that Earth remained vulnerable to threats beyond human capability, that beings of immense power could emerge and threaten the entire planet, that the martial artists who had long served as humanity's protectors might not be sufficient against supernatural evil. He had killed some of Earth's greatest warriors, had destroyed Shenron, had instituted a regime of terror that would be remembered for generations. And most significantly, he had created his own successor, ensuring that his legacy would continue, that his hatred would find new expression, that the conflict between the line of Piccolo and Earth's defenders would extend beyond his own death. This was the tragedy of King Piccolo himself, a being created from expelled evil, never given the chance to be anything other than what he was made to be, defined entirely by darkness because darkness was all he contained. Unlike the Nameless Namekian, who had struggled with good and evil within himself, King Piccolo was pure malevolence, the distilled essence of everything negative that had existed within that original being. He had no capacity for growth, no possibility of redemption, no opportunity to become anything other than the Demon King. He was evil incarnate, and his fate was sealed from the moment of his creation. His death at Goku's hands was inevitable, not because good must always triumph over evil in narrative terms, but because King Piccolo, lacking any complexity beyond his malevolence, could never adapt, never evolve, never become anything more than what he was. But his son would be different. His son, his reincarnation, the new Piccolo gestating within that egg, would inherit King Piccolo's power and memories and hatred. Yes, but he would also inherit something the original Demon King never possessed: the capacity for change. Piccolo Jr. would be born as evil as his father, created with the same singular purpose of revenge. But unlike King Piccolo, who was merely expelled darkness given form, Piccolo Jr. would be a complete being, capable of growth, capable of choice, capable of becoming something other than what he was born to be. The tragedy of King Piccolo was that he could only be evil. The tragedy of his son would be that he could be so much more. But first, he would have to shed the legacy of hatred that defined his very existence. The egg gestated in silence for 3 years, hidden away from civilization, protected by its remote location and by the simple fact that no one knew it existed. Within that shell, Piccolo Jr. grew and developed, but he was not growing in the way a normal infant would. He was not blank, not innocent, not learning about the world for the first time. Instead, he inherited his father's memories, his knowledge, his techniques, and most importantly, his burning hatred for Son Goku. From the moment of his consciousness, Piccolo Jr. knew who he was, why he existed, and what he had to do. He was born with purpose, but it was a purpose defined entirely by vengeance, by the need to make Goku suffer for what he had done to King Piccolo. When Piccolo Jr. finally emerged from his egg, he was not a helpless infant, but a fully formed young Namekian, already possessing considerable power and the accumulated knowledge of his previous life. He stood in the wilderness alone, with no companions or family beyond the memory of a father he had never actually met, but whose entire existence he remembered as if he had lived it himself. This strange duality, being both King Piccolo and not King Piccolo, both a new being and a reincarnation of an old one, defined Piccolo Jr. from his first moments. He was himself, yet he carried within him the consciousness of another. He was born mere moments ago, yet he had memories spanning centuries. He had never met Goku, yet he hated him with a fury born of personal violation and violent death. The first years of Piccolo Jr.'s existence were spent in solitary training, pushing himself to surpass the power his father had possessed, preparing for the day when he would face Goku and exact his revenge. He trained in isolation, wanting no connections, no distractions, no possibility of anything interfering with his singular purpose. He meditated to focus his Kai, practiced his techniques until they became second nature, developed new attacks that would give him an edge in the inevitable confrontation. He grew stronger day by day, week by week, month by month, the power within him expanding as he mastered control over the energy that flowed through his Namekian body. But beyond simply developing raw power, Piccolo Jr. also refined the techniques that had belonged to King Piccolo, making them his own, adapting them to his fighting style. He perfected the explosive demon wave, a massive blast of destructive energy. He mastered the ability to increase his size, making himself a giant to overwhelm opponents with sheer mass and reach. He honed his regeneration capabilities, the Namekian ability to regrow lost limbs at the cost of energy. A technique that could mean the difference between victory and defeat in extended combat. And he developed new techniques as well, innovations on his father's legacy, attacks that were distinctly his own creation, rather than simple inheritance. Most significantly, Piccolo Jr. began working on what would become his signature technique, the special beam cannon, known in Japanese as the Makanko Sappo. This attack represented everything Piccolo was at that point in his life: concentrated power, focused hatred, a single devastating strike designed to pierce through any defense and destroy the target utterly. The technique required time to charge, demanded perfect concentration, and was as much a test of will as it was a display of power. It was a technique born of patience and fury, of disciplined training and burning vengeance, a perfect reflection of Piccolo Jr. himself. He would spend 3 years perfecting this attack, making it strong enough to kill Goku, refining it until it could penetrate any defense, ensuring that when the moment came, he would have the weapon necessary to fulfill his purpose. During these 3 years, Piccolo Jr. had ample time to think, to contemplate his existence and his purpose. He was alone with his thoughts, isolated from the world, and in that isolation, the weight of his inherited identity pressed down on him. He was not simply himself. He was also his father, carrying King Piccolo's consciousness, memories, and obligations. He had been born solely to avenge a death he had experienced but not actually died from, to kill a person he had never met but knew intimately through inherited memory, to fulfill a purpose chosen for him before he existed. There was no choice in any of this, no opportunity to decide who he wanted to be or what he wanted to do with his existence. He was Piccolo Jr., son and reincarnation of the Demon King, and his destiny was written in his very DNA. Yet, even in these early years, there were hints of something beyond simple vengeance, glimmers of a being more complex than his father had ever been. Piccolo Jr. was thoughtful in a way King Piccolo had not been, contemplative and strategic rather than simply cruel and dominating. He prepared methodically rather than rushing into confrontation. He trained with discipline and focus, treating his development as a serious endeavor rather than an indulgence of power. Where King Piccolo had spawned demons to serve his will and terrorized the world for the pleasure of domination, Piccolo Jr. remained in isolation, harming no one, pursuing no grand schemes of conquest. His hatred for Goku burned with intense focus, but it was a focused flame rather than an all-consuming wildfire that sought to burn everything in its path. This difference, subtle but significant, suggested that Piccolo Jr., despite inheriting his father's memories and hatred, was not simply a duplicate of King Piccolo. He was his own being, shaped by his father's legacy, but not entirely defined by it, capable of choice, even if he did not yet realize he had options beyond vengeance. The seed of his eventual transformation was present from the beginning, dormant but real, waiting for the right circumstances to germinate and grow. But in these early years, that seed remained buried beneath layers of inherited hatred and purpose, invisible even to Piccolo himself, who knew only that he existed to kill Goku and avenge King Piccolo's death. As the 3 years passed and Piccolo Jr.'s power grew, he prepared for his dramatic entrance into the world. He would not simply hunt down Goku in secret, would not assassinate him from the shadows or challenge him to some private duel in the wilderness. No, Piccolo Jr. planned something far more symbolic, far more devastating to Goku's legacy and reputation. He would enter the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament, the same competition where Goku had proven himself as a warrior, where he had earned recognition and respect from the martial arts community. Piccolo Jr. would enter that tournament, defeat everyone he faced, and kill Goku in front of the entire world, demonstrating the futility of their heroism, proving that King Piccolo's legacy could not be ended, that the Demon King's vengeance would find its target no matter how long it took. The 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament would be the stage for Piccolo Jr.'s vengeance, the place where he would emerge from 3 years of isolation and make his presence known. He had trained for this moment, prepared for this confrontation, built his entire existence around this singular goal. And as he made his way toward the tournament grounds, as he prepared to register under the transparent alias Demon Jr. or Ma Jr., Piccolo Jr. believed he knew exactly how the future would unfold. He would fight, he would win, he would kill Goku, and he would avenge his father. His purpose would be fulfilled, his destiny would be realized, and the legacy of King Piccolo would be vindicated through his son's victory. But fate, as it so often does in Dragon Ball, had other plans. The tournament would not unfold as Piccolo Jr. envisioned. His confrontation with Goku would not result in simple vengeance, and the young Namekian, born for hatred and revenge, would begin a journey that would transform him in ways he could never have imagined, that would take him from Demon King's son to Earth's defender, from solitary avenger to beloved mentor, from the embodiment of inherited evil to one of the universe's greatest heroes. But that transformation lay in the future. For now, Piccolo Jr. approached the tournament with murder in his heart and certainty in his mind, convinced that his path was clear and his destiny was set, unaware that everything he thought he knew about himself was about to be challenged in ways that would shake the very foundation of his identity. The 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament stands as one of the most significant events in Dragon Ball history, not simply for the battles that took place within its ring, but for what it represented in terms of legacy, destiny, and the collision of past and future. When Piccolo Jr. arrived at the tournament grounds, registering under the barely concealed name Ma Jr., he brought with him 3 years of solitary training, a perfected killing technique, and the absolute certainty that this tournament would end with Goku's death and King Piccolo's legacy avenged. The tournament brackets would place various fighters against each other, but everyone present understood that the real match, the one that mattered, was the inevitable confrontation between Goku and this mysterious demon who had entered with such obvious hostile intent. Piccolo's journey through the tournament was brutal and efficient, a demonstration of overwhelming power used with surgical precision to eliminate opponents. He showed no mercy, no hesitation, no concern for the well-being of those he faced. When he fought Krillin, Goku's best friend and a skilled martial artist in his own right, Piccolo dominated the match completely, treating his opponent not as a fellow competitor, but as an obstacle to be removed from his path to Goku. The fight was one-sided, with Krillin unable to mount any effective offense against Piccolo's superior strength and technique. But the most shocking moment came when Krillin, desperate and cornered, attempted to use the evil containment wave against Piccolo, the same technique that had sealed King Piccolo away centuries before. For a moment, it seemed as though history might repeat itself, that this technique passed down through the martial arts community might once again seal away the demon threat. But Piccolo had inherited his father's memories, including the knowledge of how the evil containment wave worked and what it felt like to be trapped by it. And in a display of both his power and his tactical brilliance, Piccolo reversed the technique, turning the evil containment wave back on Krillin himself, trapping him in the container meant for demons. It was a humiliating defeat for Krillin and a terrifying demonstration for everyone watching that Piccolo Jr. was not simply strong but also intelligent, capable of adapting to techniques in real time and turning them against his opponents. As Piccolo advanced through the brackets, the anticipation built toward the final match, the confrontation that everyone knew was coming. Goku had also been progressing through the tournament, demonstrating the incredible growth he had achieved since defeating King Piccolo 3 years prior. He had trained with Kami himself, had pushed his limits far beyond what anyone thought possible for a human martial artist, though of course Goku was no human, but rather a Saiyan, though this truth remained unknown at the time. When Piccolo and Goku finally faced each other in the tournament's final match, it was more than just a fight for the championship title. It was the culmination of inherited hatred meeting the warrior who had ended King Piccolo's ambitions. The son facing his father's killer, vengeance personified against the embodiment of heroic determination. The battle between Piccolo and Goku became legendary, a fight that pushed both warriors to their absolute limits. Piccolo unleashed everything he had developed over 3 years of training, demonstrating techniques that combined King Piccolo's legacy with his own innovations. He grew to giant size, attempting to overwhelm Goku with sheer mass and power. He fired devastating energy blasts that tore apart the tournament ring and the surrounding area. And when the moment seemed right, when he had an opening, Piccolo unleashed his special beam cannon, the technique he had spent 3 years perfecting specifically to kill Goku, the concentrated spiral of energy that could pierce through any defense. But Goku was not the same fighter who had struggled against King Piccolo. He had grown immensely in power and skill, had trained under Earth's guardian himself, had developed new techniques and pushed his Saiyan potential to heights he didn't know were possible. Goku dodged the special beam cannon, weaved through Piccolo's attacks, and countered with devastating combinations of his own. The fight destroyed the tournament ring, turned the surrounding area into a crater-marked battlefield, and demonstrated levels of power that seemed impossible for martial artists to achieve. The spectators watched in awe and terror as these two beings fought with the fate of the world hanging in the balance, because everyone present understood that if Piccolo won, if he killed Goku, there would be nothing to stop him from doing to the world what his father had done, instituting another reign of terror with no one powerful enough to oppose him. The battle raged for what seemed like hours. Both fighters bloodied and exhausted, pushing beyond their limits, refusing to surrender or retreat. Piccolo poured everything he had into destroying Goku, channeling 3 years of training and inherited hatred into every attack. Goku fought not just for himself, but for everyone Piccolo might hurt if he won, for the world that would suffer under another Demon King's rule, for the future that would be lost if evil prevailed. And gradually, slowly, Goku began to gain the upper hand. His techniques proved slightly more effective, his stamina slightly greater, his determination slightly stronger. Piccolo, for all his power and preparation, found himself being pushed back, found his attacks being countered, found victory slipping from his grasp, despite everything he had done to ensure his revenge. The final moments of the fight came when both warriors were nearly spent, barely able to stand, their bodies battered and broken from the brutal confrontation. Piccolo attempted one last desperate attack, channeling the remainder of his energy into a final strike meant to end Goku, once and for all. But Goku, drawing on reserves of strength that seemed impossible, launched himself through the air in a flying headbutt that struck Piccolo with tremendous force, sending the demon crashing to the ground defeated. Piccolo lay there in the rubble, unable to continue fighting, defeated but not dead, his 3 years of preparation ending in failure, his purpose unfulfilled, his father's legacy left unavenged. And then something remarkable happened, something that would plant the first seed of Piccolo's eventual transformation. Goku, standing victorious over his fallen enemy, chose not to kill him. Despite knowing that Piccolo was dangerous, despite understanding that letting him live meant potentially facing him again in the future, despite the fact that King Piccolo's son had just tried with absolute determination to murder him, Goku chose mercy. He offered Piccolo a senzu bean, a magical bean that could heal all injuries and restore energy, essentially giving his defeated enemy back his full strength. It was an act of compassion that made no tactical sense, that endangered Goku and everyone he cared about. But that spoke to something fundamental in Goku's nature, his belief that even enemies deserved a chance, that fighting strong opponents was worthwhile, that death should not be the automatic consequence of defeat. Piccolo, lying there broken and defeated, confronted for the first time in his existence with genuine compassion from someone he had tried to kill, experienced something he had no framework for understanding. His father's memories contained no reference for this kind of mercy, no explanation for why someone would help their enemy. Everything Piccolo knew about the world told him that the strong destroyed the weak, that enemies killed each other, that defeat meant death. But Goku had defeated him and chosen not to kill him, had in fact tried to help him. And this act of incomprehensible kindness created a crack in the armor of hatred that defined Piccolo's existence. He refused the senzu bean. His pride would not allow him to accept help from Goku, but he could not refuse the experience itself, could not unknow that mercy had been offered when vengeance would have been justified. Piccolo left the tournament defeated but alive. His purpose unfulfilled, his father unavenged, his entire reason for existing left incomplete. He retreated into isolation once more, but this time the isolation was different. He was no longer training with absolute certainty toward a clear goal. Instead, he was adrift. His purpose failed, his identity in question, unsure of what he was supposed to do now that the destiny he had been born to fulfill had been denied him. The seed of change had been planted, though it would take catastrophic circumstances to make that seed germinate and grow into something transformative. For now, Piccolo remained the Demon King's son, still wearing the symbol of evil on his clothing, still identifying with his father's legacy, but no longer quite as certain as he had been. No longer quite as consumed by simple hatred, no longer quite as clear about who he was and what he wanted. The catalyst for Piccolo's transformation arrived not from Earth but from the stars, in the form of Raditz, a Saiyan warrior who came to Earth seeking his brother Kakarot, the Saiyan who had been sent to Earth as an infant and who had grown up as Son Goku. Raditz's arrival shattered the relative peace that had existed after the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament and introduced threats of a scale Earth had never faced. When Raditz kidnapped Gohan, Goku's young son, and demonstrated power that surpassed even Goku's capabilities, it became clear that this was not a threat that could be handled by one warrior alone, no matter how strong. Piccolo encountered Raditz first, confronting the Saiyan invader with the intention of eliminating this new threat to Earth. But their confrontation made it immediately clear that Piccolo alone was not powerful enough to defeat Raditz. The Saiyan warrior's power exceeded anything Piccolo had encountered, and even his best techniques proved insufficient against this alien threat. It was in this moment, facing an enemy he could not defeat alone, that Piccolo made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He proposed an alliance with Goku, temporarily setting aside their enmity to face the greater threat together. The alliance between Goku and Piccolo, between the hero and the demon, between the warrior who embodied goodness and the being created from concentrated evil, should have been impossible. They had fought a brutal battle mere months before, had tried to kill each other in the tournament, represented opposing philosophies and incompatible worldviews. But faced with Raditz's overwhelming power and the danger he posed not just to them, but to the entire Earth, Piccolo and Goku found common ground in their desire to protect the planet. It was a practical alliance born of necessity, not friendship or trust. But it marked the first time Piccolo had ever fought alongside someone rather than against them. The first time he had ever worked toward a goal larger than his own vengeance. The battle against Raditz pushed both Goku and Piccolo to their limits. Even working together, they struggled to damage the Saiyan warrior, who proved faster, stronger, and more durable than either of them had anticipated. Piccolo lost an arm early in the fight, torn off by Raditz's strength, though his Namekian regeneration allowed him to regrow the limb at the cost of significant energy. Goku took tremendous punishment, battered by Raditz's superior power. And through it all, Piccolo was developing his strategy, preparing the technique that he believed could end the fight, the special beam cannon, the same attack he had created to kill Goku, now repurposed to save him and defeat their common enemy. The special beam cannon required time to charge, time during which Goku would have to keep Raditz occupied and distracted. It was a plan that required trust, required Goku to believe that Piccolo would not simply use the charged attack to kill them both, required Piccolo to rely on Goku to create the opening necessary for the technique to succeed. And when the moment came, when Piccolo had gathered sufficient energy and Raditz needed to be held in place, Goku made an impossible choice. He grappled his brother from behind, holding him in a full Nelson grip, immobilizing Raditz, but also making himself a target, positioning himself directly in the path of Piccolo's attack. Piccolo fired the special beam cannon, the spiraling beam of concentrated energy that had taken him 3 years to perfect, and it pierced through both Raditz and Goku, impaling them both with a single devastating strike. It was a killing blow for both warriors, Raditz dying from the wound that tore through his chest, and Goku, similarly mortally wounded, sacrificing his life to hold his brother in place long enough for Piccolo's attack to succeed. The battle was won. The Saiyan invader was defeated, but the cost was Goku's life, the hero of Earth dying alongside the villain he had defeated. Before Raditz died, he revealed devastating information that would shape everything that followed. 2 more Saiyans were coming to Earth, warriors even more powerful than him, and they would arrive in 1 year's time. This revelation transformed the situation from a resolved crisis to an impending catastrophe. Earth had barely survived 1 Saiyan with Goku and Piccolo working together. How would the planet defend against 2 stronger Saiyans with Goku dead? The Z fighters who gathered after Raditz's defeat understood that they needed to become far stronger in the year they had, needed to prepare for a threat that might very well end in Earth's destruction. And in this moment, faced with the reality of Goku's death and the certainty of an even greater threat approaching, Piccolo made another decision that would change his life. He announced that he would take Gohan, Goku's young son, who had demonstrated incredible potential during the fight with Raditz, and train him for the coming battle. It was a practical decision on the surface. Gohan had shown glimpses of power that exceeded even adult warriors when his emotions surged, and training that potential could provide Earth with another defender. But it was also something more, something Piccolo himself did not fully understand. A choice that suggested the Demon King's son was becoming something other than what he had been born to be. The training of Gohan by Piccolo stands as one of the most significant relationships in all of Dragon Ball. a mentorship that transformed both the student and the teacher in profound and lasting ways. When Piccolo took the 4-year-old Gohan into the wilderness to prepare him for the Saiyan threat, he approached the task with the same ruthless efficiency he brought to everything else in his life. This was not going to be gentle instruction or patient guidance. This was going to be survival of the fittest, sink or swim, adapt or perish training designed to force Gohan's potential to manifest through sheer necessity. Piccolo's first act was to throw Gohan into a canyon and leave him there, alone in the wilderness for 6 months, with no help, no guidance, no protection beyond his own developing abilities. It was brutal, arguably cruel, the kind of training that would traumatize most children beyond recovery. Gohan was just 4 years old, had lived a sheltered life with his mother, had no experience with violence or survival or the harsh realities that Piccolo took for granted. And suddenly, he was abandoned in wilderness filled with predators, forced to find his own food, shelter and water, left to survive on his own, with the Tyrannosaurus Rex actively hunting him as prey. For Gohan, those first days and weeks were terrifying beyond measure. He cried for his parents, wanted desperately to go home, could not understand why this had happened to him, or what he had done to deserve such treatment. But slowly, gradually, through sheer necessity, Gohan began to adapt. He learned to find food, to avoid predators, to create shelter, to survive in an environment that wanted to kill him. The Tyrannosaurus that had hunted him initially became something he could evade, then something he could fight, and eventually something he could use as a food source by cutting pieces from its regenerating tail. The crying child became a capable survivor, someone who could navigate the wilderness with confidence and skill. Piccolo watched from a distance during these 6 months, hidden but present, providing occasional food and clothing without showing himself, observing Gohan's development. He told himself it was simply practical, ensuring his investment did not die before the real training could begin, making certain Gohan survived long enough to be useful in the coming battle. But there was something else happening as well. Something Piccolo did not acknowledge or perhaps even recognize. He was watching a child grow stronger through adversity, seeing Gohan adapt and overcome, witnessing resilience and determination that reminded him oddly of Goku, though without the Saiyan's inherent love of fighting. Gohan did not enjoy the struggle, did not revel in combat, but he endured it, survived it, grew through it. And that quiet strength impressed Piccolo in ways he did not articulate. After 6 months of wilderness survival, Piccolo revealed himself and began the second phase of training, actual combat instruction. This was even more brutal than the survival training, with Piccolo showing no mercy, no gentle encouragement, no accommodation for Gohan's youth or inexperience. He threw Gohan into rivers to teach him to fight currents. He attacked without warning to teach him constant vigilance. He beat him down repeatedly to teach him how to take punishment and keep fighting. Every day was pain, every session was brutal, every lesson was taught through suffering. By conventional standards, by any normal measure of appropriate training methods, Piccolo's approach was abusive, traumatizing, absolutely unacceptable. And yet, remarkably, it worked. Gohan grew stronger, faster, more capable with each passing day. His power level increased dramatically, his techniques improved, his confidence grew. More importantly, the bond between mentor and student began to develop, though neither would have acknowledged it at the time. Piccolo was not gentle, not kind in any conventional sense, but he was present. He was reliable. When Gohan needed him, when the situation became truly desperate, Piccolo was there. And slowly, gradually, Gohan began to see past the harsh exterior to something else underneath. A protector who expressed care through preparation rather than comfort, who showed love through making his student strong enough to survive. For Piccolo, training Gohan became something unexpected. He had taken on this task with purely practical intentions, seeing Gohan as a resource to be developed, a weapon to be honed for the coming battle. But spending months with this child, watching him grow and struggle and persevere, something began to shift in Piccolo's cold heart. He found himself caring whether Gohan succeeded, feeling something like pride when the child overcame challenges, experiencing something dangerously close to affection for this small, determined being who looked up to him with trust despite the harsh treatment. Piccolo did not have words for what he was feeling, did not acknowledge the bond developing between them, but it was there nonetheless, growing stronger day by day, transforming the demon who had been born for vengeance into something resembling a teacher, a guardian, perhaps even a father figure. The months passed, and the day of the Saiyan's arrival drew closer. Gohan had transformed from a sheltered, crying child into a young warrior with considerable power and skill. Someone who could hold his own in combat, who had learned to channel his hidden potential into usable strength. Piccolo had trained alongside him, pushing his own limits as well, preparing for the battle that would determine Earth's fate. And the relationship between them had evolved from captor and captive, from harsh instructor and traumatized student, into something resembling genuine connection, though neither would have admitted it openly. They were ready as 6 months of brutal training could make them, to face the Saiyan threat that was about to descend upon Earth. But preparation and actual battle are very different things. And when Vegeta and Nappa finally arrived, when the true magnitude of the Saiyan threat became clear, all the training in the world would barely be enough to survive what was coming. The battle against the Saiyans would push every warrior to their absolute limits, would cost lives, would change everything. And for Piccolo specifically, it would be the moment when the seeds planted by Goku's mercy and watered by months with Gohan would finally bloom into something transformative. When the Demon King's son would discover what it truly meant to care for someone more than yourself. When he would make a choice that would define who he really was beneath the inherited hatred and demonic legacy. But preparation and actual battle are very different things. And when Vegeta and Nappa finally arrived, when the true magnitude of the Saiyan threat became clear, all the training in the world would barely be enough to survive what was coming. The battle against the Saiyans would push every warrior to their absolute limits, would cost lives, would change everything. And for Piccolo specifically, it would be the moment when the seeds planted by Goku's mercy and watered by months with Gohan would finally bloom into something transformative, when the Demon King's son would discover what it truly meant to care for someone more than yourself, when he would make a choice that would define who he really was beneath the inherited hatred and demonic legacy. When Vegeta and Nappa descended from the sky, landing in the wastelands where the Z fighters had gathered to meet them, the sheer presence of these Saiyan warriors was overwhelming. Nappa was massive, a towering wall of muscle and battle-hardened cruelty, radiating power that dwarfed what Raditz had possessed. And Vegeta, smaller in stature but clearly the dominant presence, exuded a cold, calculating menace that spoke to centuries of warrior heritage and absolute confidence in Saiyan supremacy. The defenders of Earth, Piccolo among them, understood immediately that they were facing a threat of an entirely different magnitude than anything they had encountered before. The battle began with Nappa treating Earth's defenders like insects to be crushed, toys to be broken for his amusement before the real objective of gathering the Dragon Balls could begin. He moved with terrifying speed for someone of his size, his power overwhelming the Z fighters' defenses, his attacks devastating anyone unfortunate enough to be caught by them. Yamcha fell first, killed by one of Nappa's techniques in a death so sudden and brutal that it shocked everyone present. A stark reminder that this was not a sparring match or a tournament, but a fight for survival where any mistake could be instantly fatal. Chiaotzu sacrificed himself in a desperate attempt to damage Nappa, latching onto the giant Saiyan's back and self-destructing in a massive explosion that should have been enough to kill any normal opponent. But when the smoke cleared, Nappa stood virtually unharmed, barely scratched by the attack that had cost Chiaotzu his life. Piccolo fought alongside the others, using every technique he had developed, every ounce of power he had gained through training. But it was clear that he, like all the other defenders, was simply outmatched. Nappa was too strong, too durable, too experienced in battle. The Saiyan warrior had spent his entire life fighting, conquering planets, exterminating populations, and Earth's defenders, for all their training and determination, were simply not in the same league. They landed hits when they could, worked together to create openings, tried desperately to find some weakness or strategy that might turn the tide. But Nappa brushed off their attacks like minor annoyances, laughing at their attempts, mocking their weakness, demonstrating with brutal efficiency the vast gulf in power between Saiyan elite and Earth's martial artists. Gohan fought in this battle as well. The child Piccolo had trained, now facing the exact threat they had prepared for. The young half-Saiyan demonstrated flashes of incredible power when his emotions surged. Moments where his attacks actually damaged Nappa, where his potential manifested in ways that shocked even the Saiyan warriors. But Gohan was still a child, still terrified, still struggling with the trauma of months of harsh training, and now thrust into a battle where his friends and allies were dying around him. He froze at critical moments, his fear overwhelming his training, his youth and inexperience proving to be liabilities in a fight where hesitation meant death. Piccolo watched Gohan struggle, watched him freeze, watched the child he had trained for 6 months confronting the reality of actual life or death combat. And something had changed in Piccolo during those months of training. The demon who had been born for vengeance, who had spent his early life focused entirely on killing Goku, who had known only hatred and purpose, found himself caring deeply about whether this child lived or died. It was not simply that Gohan was useful, not merely that he represented a powerful ally in the fight against the Saiyans. Piccolo had come to genuinely care about Gohan as a person, as a student, as someone whose well-being mattered to him in ways that transcended tactical considerations. The battle continued its brutal progression, with Tien falling next, sacrificing his life energy in a desperate attack that barely slowed Nappa down. The Saiyan warrior seemed unstoppable, and the defenders of Earth were being systematically eliminated, their numbers dwindling, their strength fading, their hope evaporating as the reality of their situation became undeniable. They were going to lose. Nappa was going to kill them all. And then Vegeta would gather the Dragon Balls, wish for immortality, and Earth would fall under Saiyan domination with no one left powerful enough to resist. Everything they had trained for, all the preparation, all the sacrifice, was proving insufficient against the overwhelming power of the Saiyan race. And then came the moment that would define Piccolo's transformation, the instant when everything he had been born to be collided with what he had become through his time with Gohan. Nappa, frustrated with the ongoing resistance, decided to eliminate Gohan, recognizing the child as a potential threat given his moments of incredible power. The massive Saiyan launched a devastating energy blast directly at the young half Saiyan, an attack powerful enough to vaporize him instantly, to end Gohan's life before he even had time to react. Time seemed to slow as the blast hurtled toward Gohan, who stood frozen in terror, unable to move, unable to defend himself, about to die at the hands of the very threat Piccolo had spent 6 months preparing him to face. Piccolo moved without thinking, without calculation, without any consideration for his own survival. He threw himself between Nappa's blast and Gohan, his body intercepting the attack meant for his student, taking the full force of the devastating energy directly to his chest and back. The blast tore through Piccolo's body, inflicting injuries that were immediately fatal, destroying organs, shattering bones, dealing damage that even Namekian regeneration could not heal. Piccolo crumpled to the ground, his life force fading rapidly, his vision darkening, his time measured now in seconds rather than minutes. Gohan rushed to Piccolo's side, tears streaming down his face, unable to comprehend what had just happened, why his harsh and cruel teacher had sacrificed himself, what this act of selfless protection meant. And in his final moments, as his life ebbed away, Piccolo spoke words that he had never imagined he would say, that revealed truths he had not fully acknowledged even to himself until this instant when death made honesty unavoidable. He told Gohan that the time they had spent together, those months of training in the wilderness, had been the happiest time of his life. He had been alone for so long, isolated by his demonic nature, separated from any possibility of connection by his identity as King Piccolo's son, the Demon King's reincarnation. But Gohan had given him something he had never known before: companionship, purpose beyond vengeance, the experience of caring for someone else, the knowledge of what it felt like to protect rather than destroy. Piccolo's final words were a confession and a revelation, an acknowledgement that this demon, born for hatred, had discovered something far more powerful than vengeance. Love. Not romantic love, but the deep, profound love of a guardian for their ward, a mentor for their student, a protector for the one they have sworn to keep safe. In sacrificing his life for Gohan, Piccolo had made the ultimate expression of this love, had chosen without hesitation to die so that the child he had trained and come to care for could live. It was the complete antithesis of everything King Piccolo had represented, the absolute opposite of the demonic legacy Piccolo had been born to carry forward. And in making this choice, in this final act of selfless sacrifice, Piccolo had truly become someone new, had shed the identity of demon and become a hero, had transformed from villain to protector in the most profound way possible. As Piccolo died, as his consciousness faded and his body ceased to function, there was one final consequence of his sacrifice that he had not considered, though Kami and the others realized it immediately. Because Piccolo and Kami were two halves of the original Nameless Namekian, linked by their shared origin. When one died, so too would the other. Piccolo's death meant Kami's death as well, and Kami's death meant the Dragon Balls would cease to exist, disappearing along with their creator. Everyone who had died in the battle against the Saiyans, Yamcha, Chiaotzu, Tien, Piccolo himself, could not be revived with the Earth Dragon Balls, because those Dragon Balls no longer existed. Piccolo's sacrifice had saved Gohan's life, but had also seemingly eliminated the possibility of undoing any of the deaths that had occurred in this catastrophic battle. The revelation of Piccolo's Namekian heritage came in these moments following his death, when Kami explained to those who could hear him through various means that Piccolo was not actually a demon, but rather a Namekian, an alien from the planet Namek, and that Namek still existed out in the universe with its own set of Dragon Balls. This information would eventually lead to the Namek Saga, to the journey to Piccolo's homeworld in search of the Namekian Dragon Balls to revive all those who had fallen. But in the immediate aftermath of Piccolo's death, this was simply information, context for understanding what Piccolo truly had been beneath the demonic identity he had worn for so long. Gohan, kneeling beside Piccolo's body, was devastated by his mentor's death. The child had lost many things in rapid succession: his father to Raditz's invasion, his innocence to months of brutal training, his friends and allies to Nappa's overwhelming power, and now his teacher, his protector, the being who had been harsh and cruel, yet had ultimately cared for him enough to die for him. The weight of these losses, particularly Piccolo's sacrifice, would shape Gohan profoundly, would influence his development as both a warrior and a person, would create a bond between mentor and student that transcended death, and would persist throughout Gohan's life. For Piccolo, death was not an ending, but rather a transition. His soul traveled to the afterlife, where, because of his sacrifice, because of the selfless act that had defined his final moments, he was judged worthy of retaining his body and training with King Kai, the deity who oversaw the northern quadrant of the universe. In the afterlife, Piccolo trained alongside the other Z fighters who had fallen, increasing his power, developing new techniques, preparing for an eventual return to life that seemed uncertain but possible, given the existence of Namek's Dragon Balls. But more than the physical training, Piccolo's time in the afterlife gave him opportunity to reflect on his transformation, to understand fully what he had become in those final months before his death. The demon born from King Piccolo's dying breath, created with the sole purpose of avenging his father's death by killing Son Goku, had instead become a protector of Goku's son, had sacrificed his life to save the child of his intended victim, had discovered love and purpose and meaning in guardianship rather than vengeance. It was a transformation so complete, so fundamental, that it represented a complete rejection of everything Piccolo had been created to be. And yet it felt right, felt more authentic than anything he had experienced in his early life as Demon Jr. Felt like he had finally discovered who he truly was, beneath the inherited identity and imposed purpose. When Piccolo was eventually revived by the Namekian Dragon Balls and transported to Namek during the crisis caused by Frieza's invasion of his homeworld, he arrived to find his people, a race he had never known existed, facing extinction at the hands of a tyrant whose power dwarfed even the Saiyans who had killed him. Namek was a planet under siege, its gentle inhabitants being systematically slaughtered by Frieza and his forces in their search for the Namekian Dragon Balls that Frieza intended to use to wish for immortality. The Namekian Dragon Balls were different from Earth's, capable of 3 wishes instead of 1, and created by the Grand Elder Guru, the last survivor of the climate catastrophe that had destroyed Piccolo's father so long ago. Piccolo's arrival on Namek was a homecoming of sorts, though to a home he had never seen, among people he had never met, on a world that was dying just as it had been dying when his father's ship had fled centuries before. The Namekians who remained alive recognized something in Piccolo, saw in him a connection to their race, despite his strange clothing and aggressive demeanor. And Piccolo, for the first time in his life, encountered others like himself, beings who shared his green skin, his antennae, his fundamental nature. It was disorienting and profound, this discovery of heritage, this revelation that he was not a demon, but rather a member of an ancient and peaceful race that had nothing to do with evil or darkness. Among the surviving Namekians was Nail, the personal bodyguard of Grand Elder Guru, and the strongest warrior-type Namekian on the planet. When Piccolo encountered Nail, the warrior Namekian was already dying, having been brutally beaten by Frieza in a futile attempt to protect his elder. Nail's body was broken, his life force fading, but he had just enough strength left for one final act that would change everything for Piccolo. He proposed Namekian fusion. Namekian fusion was different from the fusion techniques that would later be introduced in Dragon Ball. It was not a temporary merging or a combination that created a new being. Instead, it was an absorption, where one Namekian would permanently merge with another, combining their power, knowledge, and essence while maintaining the dominant personality of the one who absorbed the other. The absorbed Namekian would not disappear, but rather would become part of the other, their voice and consciousness remaining present but subordinate, their strength and abilities fully integrated. It was how Namekians traditionally increased their power, a sacred technique that allowed their race to face threats despite their generally peaceful nature. Nail proposed that Piccolo absorb him, taking his power and knowledge into himself, becoming stronger through their merger. It was the only way Nail could contribute to the fight against Frieza, the only way his strength could be used to protect the remaining Namekians and potentially stop the tyrant who was destroying their world. Piccolo agreed, and the fusion took place. Nail's body merging with Piccolo's, his essence becoming part of Piccolo's being, his power adding to Piccolo's strength in a dramatic surge that increased Piccolo's capabilities exponentially. The fusion with Nail was transformative for Piccolo in ways beyond just power. Suddenly, he had access to Nail's memories, Nail's knowledge of Namekian culture and history, Nail's understanding of what it meant to be a Namekian warrior. And more than that, he had Nail's voice in his head, a consciousness that remained present and distinct, that could communicate with him, that provided company in a way Piccolo had never experienced. He was no longer alone in his own mind, no longer singular in his existence. Nail was with him, part of him, and this merger gave Piccolo a connection to his heritage that he had never possessed before. With Nail's power added to his own, Piccolo's strength increased dramatically, placing him in a position where he could actually challenge Frieza's forces, where he could make a meaningful contribution to the battle for Namek's survival. He confronted Frieza's second transformation, fighting the tyrant with newfound strength and confidence, demonstrating power that shocked Frieza and proved that this Namekian was far more dangerous than the tyrant had anticipated. For a time, Piccolo fought evenly with this form of Frieza, landing hits, dealing damage, showing that he had become a warrior worthy of respect. But Frieza had more transformations, more power reserves that Piccolo could not match. When the tyrant transformed again, reaching his final form, the power gap became insurmountable once more. Piccolo found himself outclassed yet again, his fusion with Nail proving insufficient to bridge the enormous gulf between his strength and Frieza's true power. It was a painful reminder that no matter how much he trained, no matter how much he grew, there would always be threats in the universe that surpassed him, that relegated him to supporting roles while others saved the day. Yet Piccolo continued to fight, continued to help where he could, providing support to Goku, who had arrived on Namek with strength sufficient to actually challenge Frieza. And when Goku transformed into the legendary Super Saiyan, finally defeating Frieza and avenging the Namekian race, Piccolo witnessed the emergence of a power so far beyond his own that it fundamentally shifted his understanding of his role in Earth's defense. He was not going to be the strongest. He was not going to be the one who defeated the ultimate threats. But he could still contribute, could still protect those who needed protection, could still be a mentor and guardian, even if he could not be the champion. The time on Namek, the fusion with Nail, the battle against Frieza, all of these experiences shaped Piccolo's understanding of himself and his place in the universe. He learned about his true heritage, discovered the peaceful nature of the Namekian race, understood that the darkness within him was not intrinsic to being Namekian, but rather had been the result of the original Nameless Namekian's split. he gained a companion in Nail, whose voice and presence would remain with him, providing perspective and connection. And he accepted, perhaps for the first time fully, that his value did not lie in being the strongest, but rather in the relationships he formed, the people he protected, the wisdom he could offer. When Piccolo returned to Earth after Namek's crisis was resolved, he was fundamentally changed yet again. He had died and been reborn, had fused with Nail and gained Namekian heritage, had fought beings of godlike power and survived. The Demon King's son, who had entered the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament with murder in his heart, was becoming a distant memory, replaced by a warrior who fought to protect, a mentor who guided the next generation, a being who had discovered purpose beyond vengeance and identity beyond his father's legacy. But his transformation was not yet complete. There was still one more fusion to undergo, one more merging that would make him whole in ways he had never been before. That would restore what had been lost centuries ago, when the Nameless Namekian split himself into Kami and King Piccolo. The Android Saga brought new threats to Earth. Artificial beings created by Dr. Gero, the scientist whose Red Ribbon Army had been destroyed by Goku years before. These androids possessed power that rivaled or exceeded the Super Saiyans. Mechanical and biological constructs that did not rely on Ki energy and thus could not be sensed by conventional means. And worse, there was Cell, a bio-android created from the cells of Earth's greatest warriors, designed to absorb the androids and achieve perfect form, at which point he would become the ultimate being with power potentially beyond anything the Z fighters could handle. Piccolo had continued training in the years following the Namek saga, pushing his limits, increasing his power, maintaining his relevance as a fighter, even as Saiyans with their transformations threatened to leave him behind in terms of raw strength. But the android threat made it clear that incremental improvement would not be sufficient. The androids were too strong, Cell was too dangerous, and Earth needed defenders who could match these threats. And that reality led Piccolo to consider something he had contemplated before, but never seriously pursued: fusion with Kami. Kami, the good half of the Nameless Namekian, had remained on the lookout, serving as Earth's guardian, watching over the planet, maintaining the Dragon Ball's dragon, fulfilling the purpose he had split himself to achieve centuries before. But the cost of that split had always been immense. Not just the creation of King Piccolo and all the suffering that had resulted, but also the reduction in power that came from being fragmented. The Nameless Namekian, whole and united, had possessed strength comparable to or exceeding Super Saiyans, had been a prodigy even among Namekians, had been powerful enough that Guru believed he could have defeated Frieza. But split into two halves, neither Kami nor Piccolo possessed that incredible strength. Both were fragments of what they should have been. Piccolo approached Kami with the proposal of fusion, of reuniting into the Nameless Namekian, of restoring what had been broken centuries ago. It was a practical suggestion, born of necessity. The android threat required this level of power, and merging was the fastest way to achieve it. But it was also deeply personal, a potential restoration of original identity, a chance to become whole after centuries of being incomplete. For Piccolo, it meant absorbing the good half he had been separated from, gaining Kami's memories and knowledge, becoming more than just King Piccolo's son. For Kami, it meant the end of his existence as a separate being, the sacrifice of his identity and his role as guardian to create something stronger that could protect Earth more effectively. Kami was resistant at first. He had been guardian for centuries, had dedicated his existence to this role, had created the Dragon Balls to help humanity, had watched over Earth through countless crises. Merging with Piccolo would mean the end of all that. The Dragon Balls would cease to exist once more, and Earth would lose its guardian. But it would also mean something else. It would mean undoing the original split, acknowledging that the division into pure good and concentrated evil had been a mistake, accepting that wholeness was more valuable than purity. The philosophical debate between Piccolo and Kami about whether to merge revealed deep truths about identity, purity, and the nature of good and evil. Kami had split himself because he believed the guardian needed to be pure, uncorrupted by darkness. But that split had created King Piccolo, had unleashed terror upon the world, had caused immeasurable suffering. And Piccolo, the heir to that evil, had proven through his choices and actions that beings created from darkness could still choose light, that redemption was possible, that change was real. In merging with Piccolo, Kami would be accepting that his original choice to split had been wrong, that purity purchased through division was not worth the cost, that being whole and complete with all one's flaws was better than being a fragment, however pure that fragment might be. Eventually, faced with the reality of Cell's threat and the potential extinction of Earth if the defenders were not strong enough, Kami agreed to the merger. The fusion took place on the Lookout, with Piccolo absorbing Kami just as he had absorbed Nile, taking the Guardian's essence into himself, combining their power and knowledge and experience into a single being. The surge of strength was immediate and dramatic, Piccolo's power increasing exponentially, his abilities expanding to include everything Kami had known, his consciousness now containing 3 distinct voices: his own, Nail's, and Kami's. When Piccolo spoke after the fusion, after absorbing Kami and becoming the Nameless Namekian once more, he uttered words that became famous throughout Dragon Ball. I am neither Kami nor Piccolo now. I am the Namekian who has long since forgotten his name. It was a declaration of new identity, an acknowledgement that he was no longer the Demon King's son, no longer simply the student who had trained Gohan, no longer the fragment that had existed separately for so long. He was something more complete, something whole, the restoration of what had been split centuries ago, when the original Namekian had divided himself in pursuit of impossible purity. The newly merged Piccolo demonstrated power that placed him among Earth's strongest defenders. He confronted Android 17, fighting the artificial being to a standstill in a battle that showcased his dramatically increased capabilities. He faced imperfect Cell and proved strong enough to actually damage the bio-android, to pose a genuine threat to the creature's plans. For a time, after fusing with Kami, Piccolo was arguably the strongest of the Z fighters, surpassing even the Super Saiyans in raw power and tactical capability. But as always happened in Dragon Ball's escalating power scales, this period of relevance was temporary. Cell absorbed the androids and achieved his perfect form, a transformation that placed the bio-android's power far beyond anything Piccolo could match. The Super Saiyans discovered new transformations, new levels of power that exceeded what Piccolo could achieve through fusion alone. And once again, despite his incredible growth, despite becoming the Nameless Namekian, despite restoring what had been lost centuries ago, Piccolo found himself outclassed by threats that only Saiyans, with their seemingly limitless potential, could hope to challenge. Yet this time, Piccolo accepted his role with grace and wisdom. He understood that his value lay not in being the strongest, but in the unique contributions he could make. He was the tactical genius who analyzed situations and found weaknesses. He was the mentor who trained the next generation. He was the one who could be relied upon to make difficult decisions, to see what needed to be done and do it without hesitation. And perhaps most importantly, he was Gohan's guardian, the one who had sacrificed his life for the half-Saiyan child years before, who continued to watch over him, to guide him, to help him reach his incredible potential. The fusion with Kami marked the completion of Piccolo's transformation from villain to hero, from demon to protector. He had absorbed both Nail and Kami, had gained the knowledge and power and perspective of three distinct Namekian beings, had become whole in a way that transcended his original fragmented existence. The demon born from King Piccolo's dying breath, created for vengeance and hatred, had become a being defined by wisdom, protection, and the deep love for his student and his adopted planet. The journey from that angry young Namekian entering the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament to this wise guardian fighting to protect Earth had been long, painful and transformative, marked by death, resurrection, fusion, and the slow shedding of inherited evil in favor of chosen good. The Cell Games marked a pivotal moment, not just for Gohan, but for Piccolo's understanding of his role in Earth's defense. After merging with Kami, Piccolo had achieved tremendous power, enough to fight Android 17 evenly and to actually threaten imperfect Cell. But as Cell absorbed the androids and achieved his perfect form, as the bio-android announced his tournament to decide Earth's fate, it became clear that Piccolo's strength, while impressive, would not be sufficient to defeat this ultimate threat. The tournament Cell created, the Cell Games, would require Earth's absolute strongest fighters, and that meant Super Saiyans, specifically Goku and Gohan, rather than the Namekian warrior who had once been Earth's greatest hope. Piccolo trained in the hyperbolic time chamber during the Cell Saga, that mystical room where 1 year passed for every day in the outside world, pushing his limits and increasing his power to prepare for the coming battle. The time chamber was grueling, a white void with oppressive gravity and suffocating atmosphere, where every moment was dedicated to training and pushing beyond one's current limitations. For Piccolo, it was an opportunity to maximize his strength before facing Cell, to ensure that even if he could not defeat the bio-android, he could at least contribute meaningfully to the battle. He emerged from the chamber stronger, more refined in his techniques, ready to face whatever Cell would throw at him during the tournament. when the Cell Games finally began, when the world's champions gathered on that isolated plateau where Cell had constructed his fighting ring, Piccolo understood his role with clarity. He was not there to be the hero, not there to deliver the final blow that would save Earth. Instead, he was there as support, as backup, as the experienced warrior who could analyze the situation and provide tactical guidance to those who would carry the burden of actual victory. And most importantly, he was there for Gohan, to support his student, to protect him if necessary, to help him reach the incredible potential that both Goku and Piccolo knew existed within the young half-Saiyan. The Cell Games themselves were a demonstration of just how far the power scaling in Dragon Ball had progressed beyond Piccolo's capabilities. Cell's perfect form possessed strength that made Piccolo's fusion with Kami seem almost insignificant by comparison. When Cell spawned the Cell Juniors, smaller blue versions of himself, to torment the Sea Fighters, Piccolo fought one of these creatures and struggled significantly, demonstrating that even Cell's offspring were formidable opponents for someone of his level. It was humbling in many ways, this realization that despite achieving the power of the Nameless Namekian, despite all his training and fusion, he was still ultimately outclassed by the threats Earth now faced regularly. But Piccolo's true contribution to the Cell Games came not through combat, but through his relationship with Gohan. When Goku sacrificed himself to stop Cell's self-destruction, when the battle seemed lost and Cell returned even stronger than before, when everything depended on Gohan unleashing his full potential and transforming into Super Saiyan 2, it was Piccolo's voice that helped push Gohan forward. Piccolo shouted at Gohan to stop holding back, to release the power everyone knew he possessed, to embrace the warrior within rather than the gentle scholar he preferred to be. And when Android 16's head delivered its final message before being destroyed by Cell, when Gohan's rage finally erupted and his transformation occurred, Piccolo watched with something like pride as his student ascended to a level of power that surpassed everyone, that gave Earth the champion it needed to survive Cell's threat. Gohan's victory over Cell, achieved through the combination of his Super Saiyan 2 transformation and his Father Spirit bomb technique delivered via instant transmission from the afterlife, saved Earth and proved that the next generation had arrived. For Piccolo, it was vindication of his brutal training methods years before, confirmation that the harsh lessons he had taught in that wilderness had contributed to creating a warrior capable of protecting the planet. But more than that, it was a moment of genuine emotional satisfaction. Seeing someone he cared about triumph, watching Gohan achieve what Piccolo himself never could, feeling pride in his students' accomplishments rather than jealousy or resentment. The years following the Cell Games brought a period of relative peace to Earth, a time when the immediate existential threats receded and life could return to some semblance of normalcy. Gohan, now Earth's strongest warrior, chose to focus on his education rather than training, pursuing the academic career his mother had always envisioned for him. And Piccolo, ever the dedicated guardian, kept watch, meditating on the lookout or in remote locations, maintaining his own training even as the urgency of immediate threats faded, ensuring that he would be ready if danger emerged once more. 7 years after Cell's defeat, the world was introduced to a new threat in the form of Majin Buu, an ancient magical creature of incredible power and childlike cruelty. Released by the wizard Babidi, the Buu saga would test Earth's defenders once again, would push them to their limits and beyond, would require multiple fusions and transformations and the literal destruction and restoration of the planet to overcome. For Piccolo, the Buu saga was a series of frustrations and helplessness, moments where his strength proved utterly insufficient against the magical pink monster who could turn people into candy and absorb warriors to increase his power. Early in the Buu conflict, Piccolo was turned to stone by Dabura, Babidi's servant, and remained petrified until Dabura's death released the spell. Later, when Super Buu emerged as a more dangerous and intelligent form of the creature, Piccolo found himself absorbed along with Gotenks, the fusion of Goten and Trunks, becoming part of Buu's being and contributing his intelligence and tactical thinking to the monster's already formidable capabilities. And when Buu destroyed the Earth in a fit of rage, Piccolo died along with nearly everyone else on the planet. His life ended in the explosion that turned Earth into cosmic debris. It was only through the intervention of the Namekian Dragon Balls, through wishes made by the remaining survivors on the Kai planet, that Earth and its population were restored. Piccolo was brought back to life, along with everyone else who had perished, revived to a restored Earth where Goku, returned from the afterlife temporarily, was gathering energy from all of Earth's people for a spirit bomb large enough to destroy Majin Buu once and for all. Piccolo contributed his energy to that attack, added his strength to the collective power of Earth's population, and watched as Goku delivered the final blow that ended the Buu threat and brought peace to Earth once more. Through all these battles, through Cell and Buu, and the various threats that arose during this period, Piccolo's role had fundamentally shifted. He was no longer the primary warrior, no longer the one who would face the ultimate evil in single combat. Instead, he had become the support, the guardian who protected others while they grew strong enough to be Earth's champions. He had become the mentor, the trainer, the wise advisor who provided strategic guidance and tactical analysis. And he had become the constant, the reliable presence who would always be there when needed, who could be counted on to do what was necessary regardless of the personal cost. This evolution from warrior to mentor, from primary combatant to supporting role, could have been tragic, could have been a slow fade into irrelevance for a character who had once been Earth's greatest threat and then its mightiest defender. But for Piccolo, this shift represented something else: maturity, wisdom, the understanding that strength is not only measured in power levels and combat capabilities, but also in the impact one has on others, in the legacy one creates through teaching and protection and sacrifice. Piccolo had been the strongest once, and now he was not. But he was perhaps more important than ever, not because of what he could do in battle, but because of who he had become as a person, as a guardian, as a mentor who shaped the next generation. The era of Dragon Ball Super brought new challenges and opportunities for Piccolo to demonstrate his value beyond raw combat power. When Universe 6, a parallel universe to Earth's Universe 7, challenged Beerus and Champa to a tournament between their respective universes, Piccolo was selected as one of Universe 7's representatives. Recognition of his strength and tactical capabilities even in an age of Super Saiyan gods and beyond. The Universe 6 tournament pit the strongest warriors from each universe against each other in one-on-one matches, and Piccolo found himself facing Frost, the Universe 6 equivalent of Frieza. The fight between Piccolo and Frost showcased the Namekian's tactical brilliance and combat experience. Frost, like Frieza, possessed multiple transformations and immense power. But Piccolo approached the battle methodically, using his stretching limbs to create distance and control the battlefield, setting traps and looking for weaknesses rather than simply trading blows. He demonstrated the special beam cannon, still a devastating technique even in this era of godly powers, and showed why he had earned his place on Universe 7's team despite not possessing the raw power of the Saiyans. However, Frost proved to be as treacherous as his Universe 7 counterpart. Using a hidden poison needle in his body, Frost cheated his way through the tournament, including his match against Piccolo, where he poisoned the Namekian warrior and secured a victory through deception rather than honest combat. When this cheating was discovered, Piccolo was initially declared the winner, but he chose to forfeit his rematch so that Vegeta could face Frost, demonstrating once again that Piccolo's priority was not personal glory, but rather the success of his team and the protection of his universe. Beyond the battles and tournaments, Dragon Ball Super also revealed a softer side of Piccolo's evolution, particularly through his relationship with Pan, Gohan's daughter and Goku's granddaughter. Pan represented the next generation after Gohan, a young child with incredible Saiyan potential. And Piccolo found himself in the unexpected role of babysitter and caretaker for this energetic young girl. The image of Piccolo, the former Demon King who had once terrorized the world, now changing diapers and making baby food for a half-Saiyan toddler, was both humorous and profoundly moving. A perfect representation of just how completely he had transformed from his origins. Gohan and Videl, Pan's parents, trusted Piccolo implicitly with their daughter, recognizing that beneath his stern exterior and gruff demeanor was someone who cared deeply about their family, who would protect Pan with the same devotion he had shown Gohan decades before. Piccolo attended Pan's preschool functions, watched over her during playtime, and began training her as she grew older, passing on his martial arts knowledge to yet another generation. The bond between Piccolo and Pan echoed his earlier relationship with Gohan, but this time there was no harsh wilderness training, no throwing children into canyons or forcing them to survive against dinosaurs. Instead, Piccolo's methods had evolved, become gentler while remaining effective, demonstrating that he had learned from his experiences and could adapt his teaching style while maintaining his core purpose of helping others reach their potential. The Tournament of Power, a battle royale between 8 universes where the losing universes would be erased from existence by the Omni Kings, represented perhaps the highest stakes Earth had ever faced. Piccolo was once again selected for Universe 7's team, chosen not primarily for his power, which by this point was considerably lower than the Saiyans or even Android 17, but for his tactical intelligence and strategic thinking. In a tournament where eliminating opponents by ring out was the goal, rather than killing them, where 80 warriors from 8 different universes would be fighting simultaneously in a massive free-for-all, Piccolo's ability to analyze situations, identify threats, and coordinate team responses made him invaluable. Throughout the Tournament of Power, Piccolo functioned as a field commander alongside Gohan, directing Universe 7's warriors toward optimal targets, identifying dangerous opponents that needed to be prioritized, and using his own abilities to support stronger teammates, rather than attempting to be the primary attacker. His special beam cannon remained a useful tool for eliminating distracted opponents. His stretching limbs allowed him to save teammates from ring out, and his regeneration made him difficult to eliminate quickly, allowing him to persist in the battle even when taking significant damage. Piccolo's contribution to Universe 7's eventual victory in the Tournament of Power was not measured in the number of opponents he personally eliminated, but rather in the strategic guidance he provided, the teammates he supported, and the tactical awareness he brought to a chaotic battlefield. The relationship between Piccolo and Gohan had evolved by this point from mentor and student to something more like equals and partners. Gohan, now an adult with a family and career, still trained regularly with Piccolo, both to maintain his own combat capabilities and to spend time with the being who had been more present in his life than even his own father in many ways. They fought together in the Tournament of Power, coordinated their attacks, trusted each other implicitly, and demonstrated a bond that had been forged through decades of shared experiences. From that harsh training in the wilderness before the Saiyans arrived to their current status as Universe 7's strategic core. Masako Nozawa, Gohan's Japanese voice actress, once stated in an interview that to Gohan, Piccolo was more important than Goku. That while Goku was his biological father, Piccolo had been the one who raised him, trained him, taught him what it meant to be a warrior, and demonstrated through sacrifice what it meant to care for someone more than yourself. This observation captured something fundamental about Piccolo's journey: that his legacy would not be measured in the villains he defeated or the power levels he achieved, but rather in the lives he touched, the people he mentored, and the love he gave, despite being born from hatred and created for vengeance. The events of Dragon Ball Superhero would prove that Piccolo's story was far from over, that even in an era dominated by Saiyans with godly transformations, the Namekian warrior could still surprise everyone and achieve new heights of power. The film took place during a period when Goku and Vegeta were training off-world with Whis, leaving Earth's defense to the remaining Z fighters. This created an opportunity for others to step forward, to prove their worth when the Saiyans were not available to save the day. The threat came from an unexpected source. The Red Ribbon Army, the organization that Goku had destroyed as a child, had been rebuilt by Magenta, the son of the army's original commander, and Dr. Hedo, a brilliant scientist who had created powerful androids called Gamma 1 and Gamma 2. These new androids were programmed to believe they were superheroes fighting against evil, unaware that they were actually working for the villainous organization that had created them. And beyond the Gammas, Dr. Hedo had created something far more dangerous. Cell Max, a giant berserker version of the original Cell, designed to be the ultimate biological weapon. Piccolo discovered the Red Ribbon Army's revival while investigating strange incidents near his training grounds. He infiltrated their base, gathered intelligence on their plans, and realized that Earth was facing a significant threat, with Goku and Vegeta unavailable to help. But rather than simply gathering the Z fighters to respond conventionally, Piccolo did something unprecedented. He used the Dragon Balls to wish for power. The wish Piccolo made to Shenron was for his potential to be unlocked, similar to what Grand Elder Guru had done for Gohan and Krillin on Namek decades before. Shenron granted this wish, unlocking Piccolo's latent potential and dramatically increasing his base power. But then Shenron, perhaps influenced by the dragon's own interpretation of what Piccolo needed, or perhaps as a bonus for being a long-time ally, granted an additional transformation beyond the simple potential unlock, Orange Piccolo. The Orange Piccolo transformation was visually striking and symbolically powerful. Piccolo's skin changed from green to orange. His muscles became more defined. His aura blazed with tremendous energy, and his power surged to levels that placed him in the same general tier as Goku's and Vegeta's strongest transformations. For the first time since fusing with Kami, Piccolo had achieved a genuine power-up that made him relevant to the top tier of Dragon Ball's power scaling, that allowed him to face threats that would have been impossible for him to challenge otherwise. The name itself, Orange Piccolo, was significant. When Gamma 2 suggested the name during their battle, referencing Piccolo's changed coloration, Piccolo initially rejected it, preferring something that did not reference King Piccolo or his demonic legacy. He had spent his entire life trying to shed that identity, to become something other than the Demon King's son, and he was not eager to be called King Piccolo or anything that evoked that heritage. But Orange Piccolo was acceptable, a simple descriptive name that acknowledged his transformation without tying it to his father's legacy, that represented something new rather than a callback to the past. With his new power, Piccolo fought Gamma 2, one of Dr. Hedo's strongest creations, and proved capable of matching the android in combat. It was a revelation for everyone watching, this demonstration that Piccolo could still compete at the highest levels, that he was not simply a mentor and support fighter, but also a warrior capable of facing top-tier threats directly. The fight showcased Piccolo's tactical brilliance combined with his new overwhelming power, proving that experience and strategy, enhanced by tremendous strength, made him a formidable opponent for anyone. But the true test came when Cell Max emerged. This incomplete berserker version of Cell possessed power that potentially exceeded even Goku and Vegeta's strongest forms, though without the intelligence or technique that perfect Cell had demonstrated. Cell Max was pure destructive force, a rampaging monster that threatened to destroy everything if not stopped quickly. The Z fighters assembled to fight this threat. Piccolo, Gohan, the Gammas who had switched sides after learning the truth, and others all working together to try to stop the creature before it could complete its awakening. Orange Piccolo fought Cell Max directly, trading blows with the monster, dealing significant damage, demonstrating that his new transformation was legitimate and powerful. But even with Orange Piccolo's incredible strength, Cell Max proved too durable, too powerful, too overwhelming for any single fighter to defeat. It became clear that stopping this threat would require something more. Specifically, it would require Gohan to awaken his own ultimate potential and achieve a new transformation. In a moment that echoed his sacrifice against Nappa decades before, Piccolo made himself a target. He allowed Cell Max to grab him, to crush him in the monster's grip, creating a situation where Gohan's rage would be triggered, where his student's protective instincts would activate and push him beyond his current limits. It was a calculated risk, using himself as bait to awaken the power Earth needed, trusting that Gohan would respond as he always had when someone he loved was in danger. The strategy worked. Gohan's rage erupted, transforming him into Beast Gohan, a new form with white hair and tremendous power that surpassed even his mystic ultimate form from the Buu saga. Beast Gohan engaged Cell Max directly, and with support from Piccolo, the Gammas, and the other fighters, they managed to destroy the creature's weak point and end the threat before Cell Max could fully awaken. The battle against Cell Max proved several important things about Piccolo's journey. First, he was still capable of achieving new power, still growing and evolving even after decades as a fighter. Second, his tactical intelligence remained his greatest asset. Knowing when to fight directly and when to sacrifice himself to create opportunities for others. Third, and perhaps most importantly, his relationship with Gohan was still the core of his character. That bond forged decades ago in the wilderness before the Saiyans arrived had never weakened, had instead grown stronger through time and shared experiences. Orange Piccolo represented something profound in terms of Dragon Ball storytelling. It demonstrated that non-Saiyans could still be relevant in the series, ever-escalating power scaling, that characters who had been sidelined could return to prominence, that transformation and growth were not limited to just the main Saiyan cast. For Piccolo specifically, it was validation that his journey mattered, that the demon born for vengeance who had become a guardian and mentor could also become a champion again when Earth needed him. Perhaps no aspect of Piccolo's evolution is more heartwarming or symbolically complete than his relationship with Pan, the granddaughter of his former enemy Goku, and the daughter of his student Gohan. Pan represented the third generation that Piccolo had touched, a continuation of the legacy that began when he reluctantly took a crying 4-year-old Gohan into the wilderness and discovered he could care about someone other than himself. Piccolo's role in Pan's life began when she was an infant, with Gohan and Videl trusting him to babysit their daughter when they needed to be away. This trust spoke volumes about how completely Piccolo had transformed. The same being who had once tried to kill Goku at the World Martial Arts Tournament, who had been born as the reincarnation of a demon king, was now being trusted with the care of a helpless baby, was changing diapers and making baby food and ensuring that this small child was safe and happy. The image of Piccolo as a babysitter became somewhat comedic to other characters, with Goku at one point describing him as the perfect babysitter and noting that Piccolo was better at grandfather duties than Goku himself. But beneath the humor was something profound. Piccolo had found family not through blood or race, but through choice and devotion. Pan was not his child, not his biological family, not even his species. But she was his to protect and care for, and he approached that responsibility with the same total dedication he had shown Gohan. As Pan grew from infant to toddler to young child, Piccolo's role evolved from babysitter to mentor. He began training her, teaching her martial arts, helping her develop control over her Saiyan potential. But unlike his training of Gohan, which had been harsh and brutal, born from desperation, and Piccolo's own emotional unavailability, his training of Pan was gentler, more patient, reflecting the wisdom and emotional growth Piccolo had achieved over the decades. He still pushed her to exceed her limits, still maintained high standards and expected dedication. But he did so with clear affection and encouragement rather than the cold efficiency he had shown Gohan. Piccolo attended Pan's preschool functions, visited her regularly, spent time with her that had nothing to do with training or combat. He had become not just her teacher, but genuinely her Uncle Piccolo, a family member who was present in her life, who cared about her happiness and well-being, who represented stability and protection and unconditional support. The evolution from demon to uncle, from being created for hatred to embodying familial love, represented the complete transformation of Piccolo's character arc. During the events of Dragon Ball Superhero, Piccolo's motivation for seeking power and confronting the Red Ribbon Army was explicitly tied to protecting Pan and Gohan. When he infiltrated the enemy base, when he made his wish to Shenron, when he fought Gamma 2 and Cell Max, he was doing so as a guardian protecting his family. The former Demon King's son had become a family man, someone whose greatest strength was not his power, but his love for those he had chosen to protect. The saga of Piccolo, from Demon King's reincarnation to beloved guardian and mentor, stands as one of the most complete character arcs in all of anime and manga. His journey encompasses themes of redemption, identity, the possibility of change, the power of relationships, and the truth that what we are born as does not define what we become. Every phase of Piccolo's life built upon what came before. Each transformation, literal and metaphorical, adding depth and complexity to a character who could have simply remained a one-dimensional villain. The tragedy of Piccolo's story lies in what he had to lose to become who he is. He had to die to learn how to truly live. He had to sacrifice his body to save Gohan and discover in those final moments what love actually meant. He had to absorb Nail and Kami, taking their essences into himself, which meant losing his singular identity in favor of a collective consciousness carrying multiple voices. He had to watch as threats escalated beyond his ability to handle alone, as Saiyans with their seemingly limitless potential surpassed him repeatedly, as his role shifted from warrior to support to mentor. But the triumph of Piccolo's story lies in what he gained through these losses. He found genuine connection after a lifetime of isolation. he discovered purpose beyond vengeance and hatred. He became whole through fusion, restoring what had been fragmented centuries before. He became a father figure to Gohan and grandfather figure to Pan, creating family through choice rather than biology. He achieved a transformation in Orange Piccolo that proved he could still grow and evolve even after decades. And most importantly, he became himself, not the demon he was created to be, not the vengeful son carrying out his father's will, but Piccolo, the guardian, the mentor, the protector, the hero. The voices within Piccolo, Nail and Kami serve as reminders of his journey and his complexity. These are not just power boosts or simple fusions, but actual consciousnesses that persist within him, that can communicate with him, that represent different perspectives and aspects of his identity. Nail connects him to his Namekian heritage, to the warrior culture of his people. Kami represents the good that exists within him, the selfless guardian who watches over Earth. And Piccolo himself, the synthesis of these elements combined with his own experiences and choices, represents the truth that identity is not fixed but fluid, that we are not trapped by our origins, that change is always possible. Piccolo's influence on Dragon Ball extends beyond his personal story. His relationship with Gohan remains one of the series' most emotionally resonant bonds, a connection between mentor and student that transcends typical teacher relationships and becomes something more like genuine family. His sacrifice against Nappa stands as one of Dragon Ball's most impactful moments, the scene where a demon discovered he had a heart worth breaking. His tactical intelligence and strategic thinking provide contrast to the Saiyan's tendency to simply power up and punch harder, and his presence as a constant, reliable guardian who will always be there when needed provides stability to a series where power levels escalate constantly and new threats emerge regularly. The evolution of Piccolo's character across Dragon Ball, from his first appearance as Demon Jr. seeking vengeance at the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament, through his recent achievement of Orange Piccolo form, represents a masterclass in character development. Akira Toriyama created in Piccolo a character who could grow and change naturally, whose transformation felt earned rather than arbitrary, whose every phase built logically on what came before, while still surprising and engaging audiences. The demon became a hero, not through a sudden revelation or forced redemption arc, but through gradual experiences, through relationships formed, through choices made in critical moments, through the slow shedding of inherited identity in favor of discovered self. As we come to the end of Piccolo's tragic and beautiful saga, as we reflect on his journey from villain to hero, from demon to guardian, from hatred to love, certain truths become undeniable. Piccolo's story is tragic because of what he had to endure. The deaths and resurrections, the fusions that changed his identity, the sacrifices that cost him everything, the constant surpassing by others despite his tremendous growth. But it is also triumphant because through all of that tragedy, through all that loss and pain and struggle, Piccolo discovered something far more valuable than power or victory. He discovered who he truly was beneath the imposed identity, beneath the inherited purpose, beneath the demonic legacy that had defined him from birth. The Piccolo who now protects Earth, who mentors Gohan and trains Pan, who babysits and changes diapers and attends preschool functions, who can transform into Orange Piccolo and fight alongside the universe's strongest warriors, is so fundamentally different from the angry young demon who entered that tournament decades ago seeking Goku's death. Yet, he is also the same being, the same consciousness, the same person who has simply grown and evolved and become more himself through experience and choice and love. Piccolo's legacy in Dragon Ball is not measured in power levels or victories, though he has achieved both. Instead, his legacy lives in the people he has touched. In Gohan, who became Earth's champion partially because of Piccolo's harsh training and ultimate sacrifice. In Pan, who is learning martial arts from her uncle Piccolo. In the countless times he has been there when needed, reliable and constant and dedicated to protecting his adopted home and chosen family. The transformation of Piccolo stands as proof that redemption is possible, that change is real, that what we are born as does not define what we must become. He was born from evil, created for vengeance, designed to be a demon king who would terrorize the world. But he became a hero, a mentor, a guardian, a family man who would die to protect a child, who would sacrifice everything for those he loved. That transformation was not easy, not quick, not without tremendous cost. But it was real, and it was complete, and it stands as one of the most satisfying character arcs in fiction. As Earth faces new threats, as the universe presents new challenges, Piccolo will be there, standing watch, ready to fight, prepared to sacrifice if necessary, always protecting, always mentoring, always being exactly what Earth needs him to be. The Demon King's son has become Earth's guardian in truth, not through title or position, but through decades of choices, through relationships forged and maintained, through love discovered and nurtured, from villain to hero, from hatred to love, from demon to family man. Piccolo's saga is complete, and it is beautiful. And so, as we close this chapter, as we let this story settle into our minds as we drift towards sleep, or continue with our day, remember Piccolo's journey. Remember that change is possible, that redemption is real, that we are not trapped by our origins or defined by our worst moments. Remember that love can bloom in the coldest hearts, that family can be chosen rather than inherited, that heroism is measured not in power, but in sacrifice and dedication, and the willingness to protect others, no matter the cost. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the tragic saga of Piccolo, from villain to hero, from darkness to light. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Dragon Ball's most compelling characters, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what aspect of Piccolo's journey resonates most with you, what moments you found most powerful, what transformations you found most meaningful. Until next time, rest well and remember, even demons can find redemption, even hatred can transform into love, and even those born for destruction can become the greatest guardians.